welcome Margie to My Life in Seven Charms.
Thank you so much for having me, Annoushka.
Oh, so looking forward to hearing all about your charms. So your first charm, I love this charm actually. So it's a little three-dimensional made in white gold, but it's a three-dimensional sweetie, like a traditional old-fashioned sweet that's got paper around it, and the paper is pink. You could imagine pink stripes. So I've done that as with pink sapphires in lines, and it actually opens so you can put a little photograph inside it. So there's a locket there, so you can put whatever memory this particular little pink and white stripy sweet evokes. But tell me, Margie, why the sweetie? Because I love sweets too, so I'm thrilled to do this.
I love the way you've done this. This is honestly just such a treat to be on your podcast, and this is so beautiful and better than anything that I could have pictured it would look like. I think what I realized is in preparing for this was that I have a really terrible memory, but what I do remember very vividly is my life through food. And I think when I think back to my childhood, it's so peppered with food experiences, and I can so vividly remember the first time I ate certain foods, and so much of that for me relates back to Salcombe. My grandmother, Salcombe in Devon. Yeah. My grandmother used to live in Salcombe, and we'd spend every holidays there really. And they had this amazing old-fashioned sweet shop called Crunchies. And you'd get a pink and white striped paper bag, and you'd go in, and I'm very old, so this was back in the time when 1 penny sweets were actually 1 penny.
I remember that rather too well.
You could get a lot for your pocket money, and it was heaven. You'd get strawberry bonbons that would melt in the bag in the sun, and they'd stick your teeth together, and fizzy cola bottles, and delicious fudge, just amazing. And so Crunchies, to me, those pink and white striped bags, it looked exactly like you've drawn on this sweet there.
Did you have to save up? Were you allowed it every day when you were with you? Because normally grannies spoil you lots.
Yeah, grannies are quite spoiling. Well, I think also my parents got divorced when I was quite little, and that's one of the things about spending time with different parents at a time, is that you always kind of get treats.
Yes.
So I think my dad was never really keeping an eye on how many sweets we were eating, which was quite good.
So that was your father's mother.
Yeah. And I think 2 doors down from Crunchies, the sweet shop, there was Salcombe Dairy ice cream, which is the best ice cream in the world. I still maintain that. Back then, you couldn't get this ice cream anywhere else. They had a honeycomb ice cream, which I can just so clearly remember the first time I tasted that. And it was honestly the best thing I've ever eaten. So yeah, it's so fun.
Do you have did you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have a lot of brothers and sisters.
Do you? How many have you got?
Well, I have a brother and a sister, and then I have 2 stepbrothers and 3 stepsisters. Right. So there were always a lot of us.
Yeah. So did you go around in a gang with your brother and sister when you were in Salcombe?
So it's funny, when your parents aren't together anymore, you have sort of 2 different lives. Yes. So those step siblings would never spend time together, but we would always shift between the 2, if that makes sense. So sometimes there were 5 of us, sometimes there were 6 of us.
Nice.
Was it a
happy childhood?
It was, yeah.
Despite the divorce and
and it just, for me, as I said, like I do just have such a bad memory, but I sort of remember in snapshots. And Salcombe to me, even though half the holiday I would have been with my mum, not in Salcombe. Salcombe was just such a defining place.
That
it's a really
by the sea.
By the sea, and it's sort of, I don't know whether this is me misremembering it, but it sort of has its own microclimate. And my grandmother would have palm trees in the garden, which
Wow.
it felt very tropical. And every summer was just really hot, and we'd just spend time learning to sail and going on the boats, and it just was a very idyllic
Happy.
place.
Yeah.
But I hadn't been back since my grandmother died. So it's been sort of 15 years since I've been back, and we took my eldest daughter a few summers ago. And I guess you should never go back to places that mean a lot to you, because it had just changed so much. It's become a very cool place
Yes.
that
Yeah.
it's very popular, and it wasn't like that back when we were there. It was just
So
very
do you wish you
basic
hadn't
and
gone?
kind of,
Do
yeah,
you?
yeah. It honestly had changed.
Oh,
When we were there, there weren't really any cars, and there were the beginning of some shops, but it was just very small and
yes, I
innocent and
can
small.
imagine.
And
Yeah.
now it was just like car parks everywhere and just so many people. And I think also not being able to go and stay in my grandmother's house.
Yes. Did you go back and see where it
Yeah,
is?
which
Yes.
again, I
Yes.
probably shouldn't
Yeah,
have
you
done
probably
that. And like,
shouldn't.
she was buried in this really beautiful, it sounds strange to say about a graveyard, it being a beautiful graveyard, but it's right on the top of a hill, and it looks out over the whole of Salcombe, and it is gorgeous. I think my dad like reserved himself a spot there because it's so beautiful. And we went to see my grandmother there, and it's just been completely developed all around, so she doesn't have her view
Oh
anymore.
no,
And
no, that is
yeah,
really, really
yeah,
difficult.
you shouldn't go back.
Well, so then your next charm is a Japanese cherry blossom, which I love the idea of this. So I've made this almost like you've just broken a branch off a cherry blossom tree, and so the branch itself is made of yellow gold, and it's all, you can see it's all kind of wibbly wobbly, it's just exactly as you'd expect it to be, three-dimensional, and then I've put the cherry blossoms themselves made in white gold set with pale pink sapphires, and a tiny yellow sapphire in the centre. And the flowers all move, so that because I really like my jewellery to move and do what you'd expect it to do. And it's just very, very simple. And on the back it's got texture, which would be the texture you'd absolutely expect to see on the branch and on the flowers. But why Japanese cherry blossom?
It's so beautiful the way you've drawn that. Japanese cherry blossom means a lot to me. I feel like everyone loves blossom. Obviously, it's a gorgeous time of year when it comes out. It's spring, and
Coming now.
well, yes, it feels silly to sort of say that that's something that you love when that's something everybody loves. But Japanese cherry blossom in particular, my husband is half Japanese,
Ah,
and yeah, we met when we were at school, and
at school, what age were you?
yeah, so when we were 17, we started going out.
Wow. In
And
an English
then
school?
in an English
Yeah.
school, yeah.
Boarding school? Not boarding school.
Yes, I
Right.
changed school for sixth form and met him when I got to my new school. So we went out for sixth form, and then we went traveling together in between school and starting university. So we worked for the first half of the year, and then we went on this amazing 6-month adventure. And we started on the Trans-Siberian Railway going across Russia,
Gosh, how amazing.
went all the way down through China, went to Thailand, and then we ended up in Japan. And it was amazing.
His family living in Japan?
Yeah, so so his father has lived in England for a long time, but his father's family all still live in Japan. So we got to Japan for the cherry blossom season, which is very hard to time because like in the UK, you don't know exactly when it's going to come.
Right.
But it's something that I'd heard a lot about, of how magical this
Yes.
is, and it's incredible.
And it's the same, it's April.
Yeah,
It's about
it's
April, kind of
around
May.
April.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you I've spent a bit of time in Japan, and I remember going to also seeing the Japanese cherry blossom. So where did you see your first which place in Japan did you
I
see it?
I think mainly in Tokyo. But we traveled around, so I didn't really know that much about Japan before we went, but so we spent time in the cities, went to Kyoto and Tokyo, but we also went up into the mountains and went skiing, and we went into the countryside where my husband's aunt is a very successful potter, so she has this amazing kiln and pottery, set up in the countryside. And so yeah, just seeing the cherry blossom everywhere. It's like it is in the UK when it's at its very, very best, but just so much more dramatic. Yeah. And then when it starts to fall and it carpets the floor and you've got these beautiful Japanese gardens, it's so beautiful. And when we got married in April in the UK, and it was the year of the Beast from the East. So the idea had been that we would have beautiful blossom and it would be lovely, but the Beast from the East happened in March.
Yes,
so
that's right.
in March
that,
it was like
freezing
-5, snow everywhere. And then I don't know how, but by some miracle, by the time we got married a few weeks later, it was a heat wave and the blossom had just started to come out.
Right.
So we still managed to have blossom filling the church and all over our cake. So yeah, I feel like cherry blossom means a lot to me.
I must just ask you, but having spent some time in Japan, and do you still go back? Do you go back there?
We have been, well, have we been back? I've been twice in total.
Right.
And we haven't been back because of COVID and all the rest of it. And now we have 2 babies. I don't know, I feel like it's one of those things where we're constantly waiting for the right moment and then something else comes along and then it's suddenly not the right moment. But we want them to be able to appreciate it, and I think they're too small.
Are they going to speak Japanese?
I hope so, but not if that is down to me, because I can say very few words in Japanese, but I would love that. Yeah, so they're a quarter Japanese.
Okay, so that would be wonderful if they did. My goodness.
Yeah.
But Margie, what about Japanese food?
Japanese food, it's amazing. So very lucky that my husband is a very good cook and his father is also brilliant at making amazing Japanese feasts whenever we go and stay. But going to Japan and having the food there, it's like nothing that you could imagine having it back in England. It's so different, like incredible ramen with just the most beautiful broths, and it's all quite simple, but it's just it's just gorgeous, and tasting the best sushi that I've ever had in my life. And also surprisingly to me, Japan, they have amazing bakeries, which I don't normally associate baked goods with Japanese cooking necessarily, but just like beautiful, almost French style bakeries with like beautiful pastries and breads and like milk breads where it's fluffy and soft and almost like cotton candy. Yeah, just beautiful.
I had no idea. My memory of Japan and food is all the restaurants got those plastic versions of their sushi outside.
Yeah, in the windows.
Like, what is that?
No, it must be big business for whoever creates those
It
replicas.
must be, but I guess it's so you understand what you're getting, because of course it's such a foreign language.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why.
You must have you read a book? There's a book written by Joe Johnson called "Strange but Not Strangers."
Oh no, I haven't.
Have you read it?
No, I haven't.
You should read it, because and you should get your husband to read it, because it's absolutely fascinating. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Okay, moving on to your next charm, which you describe as a shooting star, and and so the way I've imagined this, because I love the whole thing about the movement in the star. So I've set the star in a circle, really to represent the planet, and the circle is made of 18-karat gold, and then the star itself is white gold with yellow sapphires on the star, and the tail of the star is kind of set with small diamonds. But the most important bit about it is that if you spin the star, it will spin very rapidly, and you so much to kind of evoke that feeling of a shooting star when it goes through the sky. Not quite sure if you've seen one or not, but I'm fascinated to know why a shooting star.
That's so beautiful. I chose this charm to represent a certain period of my life where I didn't really know what I was doing. I just,
We've all been through that. Yeah.
I just finished studying at Oxford, and then I did a master's in law. So I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, but I did try very hard to be a lawyer, and just doors were just not opening, and it felt like trudging uphill.
Well, hang on. So you went to Oxford,
Yes.
read law at Oxford,
No,
or
I
you
read geography.
read geography, and had you always wanted to go to Oxford?
I hadn't, but both my parents went to Oxford, and none of my siblings went there, and I was the youngest, so I felt like I was their last chance, and so I just to appease them, I applied. And I never in a million years thought that I would get in. And my husband was also applying because he had his own connection with there, he was a choral scholar when he was a little boy growing up in Oxford. So he already had these links to Oxford. So we both wanted to apply, but separately. And then just kind of against all odds, we both happened to get in.
And what college did you go to?
I was in Teddy Hall, and my husband was in Christchurch.
That's so weird. My husband was at Teddy Hall.
No way.
And he always talks about this. I didn't go to university, so he always talks about this Oxford experience. And so, what was so important? So, what did you find so, interesting about Oxford?
I think it's funny because it's one of those things that we talk about it now, that we definitely took for granted the time that we had there, and I don't think I'm one of these people in lots of regards, but I do look back and regret that I didn't really
embrace it.
Yeah, embrace it, and I wish I'd worked harder, and I wish I just appreciated, having the time and being somewhere like that that's got so much history, and it's such a beautiful city, and there's just so much that you can do and absorb, and you just don't think like that when you're 19 or 20.
No, I think
you just take everything for granted. You feel it was so exciting getting in there, and I felt so lucky to be there. But like with everything, that kind of wanes in the day to day, and it's just suddenly it's where you are, and you just completely take it for granted. So yeah.
But so you did geography, and then you rather casually said then you went into law, and then so why did you do that?
Because I think I felt unfairly there was an expectation on me to do something academic with my life, and
was this coming from your parents, do you think?
It wasn't coming from them, but I felt like it was, which in retrospect is very unfair, and is actually quite a good life lesson, that you can't project things on other people without actually giving them a chance to have an opinion. Or I think we spend a lot of time worrying that we're going to disappoint people or upset them, and actually you never actually have that conversation. So it's all just your own insecurity or worry.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think Oxford's such an important part of your if you've been lucky enough to go. I see my own husband like wishing that some of our children had gone there. They didn't. But so then you went on to do law. And then what happened?
So I went to London, and I did effectively a master's in law. It's the law conversion course, and that's kind of what it is. And during that time, I did try really hard to get a job as a lawyer, and it just wasn't happening. And some of it I definitely didn't deserve. I didn't deserve the jobs that I was going for. But then I got to a point where I was actually doing well in the interviews, and I was, putting my best foot forwards, and I did feel like I, was doing as much as I possibly could, and it just wasn't happening.
So you weren't offered a job in law at all?
No, I wasn't offered a job.
Oh, you weren't? Okay.
No. And then you have a decision to make if you want to go on and do the second part of the law course, which isn't a master's in law. It's just very technical, and you would never do it unless you were actually going to become a lawyer. Right. And for most people, you've already got your job by then, and your law firm pay for the second part of the course.
Yeah.
And so that was a big gamble. I didn't want to embark on something like that without having the security of a job. And it just, yeah, so the coming back to this charm is I went on holiday at the end of the masters, and I went with my mum and one of my best friends, my stepfather, and we went to Islay, which is this beautiful island off the west coast of Scotland. And it's honestly, I think, one of the most beautiful places in the world. It's just, the air smells different. You can see the world is round. It's just unbelievably beautiful. And every day you're outside and you just feel a million miles away from London and from all these interviews and the stress of the exams and everything. And I don't know, having that distance, I just was able to just ask myself why I was trying so hard to do this thing that just, it wasn't happening, and was it even what I really really wanted to do? And I don't know, it sounds very I don't know, like dreamlike, but I just had this realization of, maybe I only have one chance to try and, you know, make something of myself and find something that I love doing. And cooking's the thing that I've always loved doing the most. So what would happen if I tried to do that? One of the first things that I really learned to cook completely on my own was, I have very vivid memories of those peppermint creams, where you mix together the icing sugar. I think it's just icing sugar, water, and peppermint drops. I don't know. And I'd spend ages rolling out the dough and stamping out those perfect circles, and then they sort of melt in your mouth with the icing sugars.
Absolutely delicious.
Yeah.
That was the inspiration for going on to make cooking your career.
Yeah, I think sometimes when you're just in the day to day, it's very easy just to keep putting one foot in front of the other, and just you're able to do that whilst also feeling quite aimless, and that's definitely how I felt. But having this break and being in Isla, I just felt so far removed from all of that, and I felt like it gave me enough distance to actually, I guess, be brave. And
I was just going to say that, because I mean, how old were you? 20?
Yeah, sort of 21.
Yeah, so you were incredibly brave to do that. I just think that takes so much confidence and a real leap of faith. I'm not sure I would have done that at 21. But your next charm is a shamrock. So I have a feeling I know why you've chosen the shamrock. But I've seen this as a locket, and obviously a shamrock is 4 leaves, and it's representative of Ireland, I think, if that's probably what it is. It's a locket. It's got graduated savorites on the front, and I've engraved it on the back to say Ballymaloe, because you gave me a little hint of what that might be. But tell me what was so important about Ireland for you.
So when I got back from Isla and I'd made the decision that I was going to try and pursue cooking in a professional way, my parents were very supportive, but everyone agreed that I should probably try and get some official training or some sort. And I'd always heard amazing things about Ballymaloe, which is this incredible cookery school in Ireland.
Dying to know more about that, because everybody talks about Ballymaloe. So what amazing. Is it about Ballymaloe
so
that's
it's
so
this
special?
Incredible cookery school set in beautiful land where they grow lots of their own produce, and it was set up, it's run by the Allen dynasty, who are very famous. And it's just, it's this place where you go for 3 months, and it's just completely immersive. You live on the land, and you cook all day. Like, you learn what you're going to cook the following morning and the afternoon. And I felt, going there, I had this realization of, oh, this is what it's like to be really interested in something. Like, I was the first in the lecture seats waiting for the class to start. I was taking all the notes. I couldn't wait to get up in the morning and put it into practice. And that isn't how I felt when I was at university. Like I didn't go to nearly enough lectures. I just did the bare minimum that I needed to do to get by. And going to Ballymaloe, it was a real dawning of, oh, this is what it's like to really be passionate about something. Yeah. So that was a real eye opener. And actually getting there was, I'd felt like I'd spent all this time trying to get a job in law, and it just wasn't happening. And then as soon as I decided that I wanted to do something in cooking, so I'd heard all of this amazing stuff about Ballymaloe. And so I rang them and they said, well, term's already been going for a week and we also have a waiting list of about 50 people. So if you want to try next year, then good luck. Mm-hmm. But I needed something to do immediately. So I was devastated. But within an hour, I got a phone call and they said, this never happens. But 2 minutes after you put the phone down, someone has dropped out. And if you can come on the plane tomorrow, you can have the space.
Oh my God, so that's fate.
Yeah,
I mean, that is meant to be.
I dropped everything and packed my bags and went to Ireland for 3 months. And it was a really strange thing that from the moment I decided to do cooking, those kind of things kept happening to me.
What's kind of fate and
so I got to the end. I got to the end of Ballymaloe, and I knew that whilst it's amazing and you learn so much, if you were just to leave there and not cook for a while, you wouldn't get the full benefits from it. To really get the most value from it, you have to go and cook professionally and really add to what you've learned and consolidate it all. But I didn't know what form that was going to take. And then a random conversation that my dad had at a dinner party led to someone needing a chef in South Africa to teach the local women how to cook. So a week after I finished Ballymaloe, I was on the plane to South Africa, went to KwaZulu-Natal for 3 months and set up a kitchen.
Where is KwaZulu-Natal?
Well, it's very remote, but it's where the Zulu wars were fought. So it's very famous. It's in KwaZulu-Natal, and you fly to Johannesburg, and then it's a very long journey to get there. But yeah, it's sort of not. That's the reason that it's famous, and so it's a big tourist spot because of that. And so I spent 3 months out there teaching
the local
women how to cook for this new hotel that was opening, and devising the menu and setting up a commercial kitchen, which I'd never worked in a commercial kitchen. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was one step ahead of
them.
Yeah, and the people setting up the hotel. I think that's a lesson that I've learned in life through speaking to a lot of people, is you do only have to be one step ahead to be knowledgeable or to be an expert, and you're constantly learning at the same time. But yeah, definitely very out of my comfort zone.
But that must have been fascinating. Was that quite challenging, teaching? Because presumably had they ever cooked Western food before?
And they hadn't eaten it either.
Oh, so they didn't even know what it was supposed to taste like.
No, so they eat. I think it's called mealy meal, which it's a form of polenta.
Right.
And it's delicious. It's sort of cooked slowly as a porridge.
Yeah.
But that's the main staple out there. And then they eat a lot of stews, and the meat should be as chewy as possible. That's the sign of it being good. So obviously very different to what we're used to. So I was sort of sourcing fillets of beef, which they were giving them away because no one wants to eat fillets out there. Yeah, so it was just a real education in something like a club sandwich. It's obviously very basic to make, but you've got to start a step backwards from that and actually get them all tasting it. And yeah, it was very.
That was absolutely fascinating. Did they like it?
No,
they didn't like it.
No,
because
not
it's quite
at all.
hard to cook something you really don't like, isn't it?
Yeah, no. I think they thought it was gross.
No.
But they were lovely, and I made amazing friends during that time. But it was all very outside of my comfort zone. Like going to Ireland at very short notice is not something that I would have pictured myself doing. And then going alone to South Africa is again not something that I would naturally have chosen to do. And then when I got back from South Africa, I knew then that I really needed to work in a restaurant because I needed that had been an amazing experience, but I needed to gain knowledge from people who knew more than me.
Yeah.
And it sounds like I'm making this up, but there's Sally Clark's amazing restaurant is around the corner from where my mum lives, and they had a sign in the window saying that they needed a chef. So I took my CV in the day after I landed, and they were so short-staffed. I had an interview that afternoon, and I started the next morning. So it was very strange that just
meant to be.
yeah,
Another thing, meant to be.
felt like
God,
that.
how fascinating. I wonder what year that was. I used to supply Sally Clark with fish.
Oh, did
So maybe
you?
you were
Oh,
the
no
chef I
way.
used to
Yeah,
talk
maybe I
to.
was.
God,
I'm so bad
what
with
an amazing
mm,
person to learn from then, my goodness. And so
incredible.
how long did you do that for?
Just over a year with Sally, and then I did different stages at different restaurants.
Yeah.
And then I went to work for a catering company as their head chef, and I did that for a year or so before then realizing that is something that I could do myself.
But before we move on to that, are you were you not tempted to start a restaurant or
No.
no? And why was that?
So going into working at a restaurant, I knew I wasn't going to enjoy it, which
Right.
sounds very negative, and I don't mean it in a negative way. Just, I don't know if you've ever done something that you know you have to do because it's going to be really good for you,
Yes.
but you also know you're probably not going to enjoy it, and you just have to get through it. That's how I felt about restaurant cooking.
And I mean, I know a little bit about restaurants, having supplied many of them with fish for many, many years. But was it the pressure that was it the kind of speed and the pressure
Yeah,
and the hours and all the things that we know restaurants?
yeah, but it's unbelievably hard work. It's physically tiring. The hours are very antisocial and
Yeah.
long. But it wasn't that so much. It was that for me, cooking is such a creative thing, and obviously, when you're in someone else's restaurant, obviously they have the way that they want it doing, and
Yes.
it's their vision. But for me, that just felt very alien because for me, cooking had always been very creative, and so it was just a very different form of cooking, and I didn't get out of it what I was used to getting out of cooking, which was
Yeah.
that creative outlet.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's so intense. It's such high pressure. I mean, I used to I hope Sally never hears this, but I used to pray that everyone would cancel. If we got a cancellation, I'd be so happy. And then sometimes when it was coming to the end of service, the maitre d' would be like, "I hope you don't mind. We've had another walk-in." I was
Oh,
like,
God,
"No, tell them we're closed."
yeah.
Obviously, that's great for the restaurant that it was very busy and no one ever cancelled. But that was how I felt.
Gosh, that's it's so interesting that you kind of felt that everything changed when you made a decision to go into cooking and ditch law. Maybe that's what the shamrock represents, all those four leaves, which is good luck.
Yeah. I think when I thought about it, that was just to represent that amazing 3 months in Ireland that I felt so grateful for. But yeah, you're
That,
right.
that
That could also represent
well,
how I felt so lucky to.
yes, yeah,
Mm.
no. Which brings me very neatly onto this next charm, which
Oh.
is well, I really like to make this charm. So this is a banana peel or banana skin. I love to make things as kind of realistic as they possibly can be, just in tiny. So I visualize this banana peel or skin as exactly as you would imagine it, in yellow gold, burnished edges on the edges of the banana, but the skin peeled back, And when I say slightly burnished edges, because we can get a little bit of brown on the edge of the gold, um, and the remains of a bit of the banana in white gold that you haven't eaten, and just because I love the movement, is to have a tiny little seed pearl hanging from the end, just because I like the idea of that. But I'm fascinated. Talk to me about banana peels.
Well, I picked this for you, Annoushka, because I thought you might enjoy making the banana skin.
Thank
I
you.
thought that might be right up your street. I guess this is a strange charm to choose in lots of ways, because for me, this banana peel actually represents my biggest failure in life.
All right.
And but I think that's okay, because what I have learnt is we learn a lot more from things that go wrong than if everything only ever goes right. You don't know how much is down to you or down to circumstance, and you can just carry on. But what do you actually really learn from that? And so I think I didn't feel like this at the time, but now I've had several years to process it. I'm actually grateful for what I do perceive to be my biggest failure, which is, so I've always been very entrepreneurial, and I've had a million business ideas over the years.
Yeah.
And it is very strange to me that of all of all the ideas that I've ever had, this is this is the one that I decided to really pursue. But it was a healthy ice cream made with the base of bananas. So bananas are actually kind of magical in that if you freeze them, when you then blitz them up in the food processor, they go deliciously creamy, and it's this healthy instant ice cream. And I could see on the internet and on social media that people loved making their own version of this, sort of millions and millions of tags for this banana ice cream, but no one was making it commercially. And because I was in the world of food, I had this catering company. It felt a very natural thing
Was
for me
your
to do.
catering, sorry to interrupt, but was it your own catering? You left the restaurant world
Yeah,
and set up your own catering
yeah.
business.
I worked for another catering company, and whilst I was there, I was the head chef, and it made me realize it was something I could do on my
Right.
own.
Right.
So a catering company slash freelance private chef, just
Yes.
sort of doing anything and everything. But I'd always dreamed of doing something bigger and having a business, and I'd studied the stories of the innocent founders, and I read those kind of books as though they're novels. Like, that is
Yeah.
my fun thing to
The
do in my spare
self-help
time.
and yeah.
Not self-help, just startup stories and how people
Right.
got to where they are,
Yeah.
and I just find it so
Well,
interesting.
that's where your podcast is
Well,
so interesting. Yeah.
and so, yeah, I saw what I thought was a gap in the market for this healthy ice cream that was not only a pudding, it was a breakfast, it was, and the dream was to become the next Innocent and sell it into supermarkets and
And did you?
sail away into the sunset. We sold into farm shops and delis, and we did a pop-up shop, we did festivals, that kind of thing. And then the big breakthrough happened when we did sell into one supermarket. We got a big contract, and so it was a success in some regards.
Well, hold on a minute. That sounds very successful. So what was not successful about it?
I think the timing was wrong.
Right.
So I think I'd always been taught, and everything that I was learning from all this stuff that I was reading was that if you just work really, really hard and you believe in what you're doing, you will succeed. And I have since come to learn, I think that's missing a piece of the puzzle. I think that can be true,
Yeah.
but I think you can't, you you have to also take into account timing, whether your idea is happening at the right time. Like, is the world ready for you
For
and your
banana
banana
ice
ice
cream.
cream? And there are lots of stories of you actually don't want to be the first. You want to be the second,
That is
because the
very true.
first has laid all that groundwork. They spent all the money educating people about what the product is, and then it's often the second brand that sort of swoops in and
Yes.
capitalizes on it. So I thought I was being very clever by doing something that no one else was doing. Like, that was very important to me, that
It
couldn't
was
be
new.
something that anyone else was doing.
Yeah.
And I've since come to learn that that's not necessarily a good thing. But basically, it got to the point where and I can see it very clearly. Like, there are so many occasions with different buyers. If they'd have said yes when they said no, everything could have changed, but they didn't. They said no, or they said yes, but come back in 6 months. And for a small business, you don't have 6 months. Like,
Yeah.
you have now.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we didn't get enough contracts. And I think I got to the point where, to take it to the next stage, would have had to raise money and all of that stuff. But it was really hard. And I think when you're doing something like that, you can be so passionate about it and you can work really, really hard, but you have to get enough traction and enough little wins to keep you motivated. And I felt like it was just 2 years of just, I felt really exhausted by it, to the point where when I decided that I didn't want to take it on to the next stage, and I was going to walk away from it, I felt relief.
Oh,
Like,
did
I
you?
felt a huge weight had been
Yeah.
lifted off my
So you
shoulders.
knew that was the right thing to do.
I
What
think
was
if in that moment I had felt really upset, I could have changed my mind, and it would have re-motivated me. But I felt just relief.
had you taken on employees and to build it, or were you trying
Yeah.
to do it all at the
So
same time?
so yeah, these are things that I have learned from. I think I had one employee, but I was still working most of the time doing my cooking in order to
Fund.
support my one
Yes.
employee. And I think I hired the wrong person, and it took me too long to realize that. But I was I was using that person as a shield, because I wasn't confident in my own abilities.
Right.
So I hired someone to do the selling when really,
They wanted to see you.
and I should have been the one doing it, but I just didn't believe in myself enough.
It's
Um,
so interesting. There's so many lessons to learn from that, isn't it?
mm,
Because my experience is that you kind of quite often know when you've got the wrong person, and we're very often too slow to call it quits.
yeah,
And
because it's awkward
mm,
and uncomfortable, and you want to believe in someone.
exactly, yeah.
And but yeah, I definitely, that was a huge learning.
Um, but I mean, you say banana peel. I mean, now I understand why banana, but I mean, did, I mean, in a way, closing a business and recognizing it, that you wanted to close it, is a success. I mean, I see that as success as opposed to failure.
Thanks, Annoushka.
What do you think? I mean, I
I think
really do
I
think that.
think now I'm able to look back at it, and it's just an amazing, exciting thing that I did. And it's but j I don't know, it was so consuming, and I had such big dreams for it, that I think when something doesn't live up to what you dream it could
Yes.
be, it does feel like a failure. But now, you're right, I'm older and I've had time to reflect on it. I don't necessarily, I think it technically is a failure, but that's not how I view it.
So now, Margie, now I understand why it's a banana peel as opposed to the banana, I
Yeah,
guess. Um, but I still think it's all part of the journey.
yeah.
Which brings me on to your next charm, which I'm going to find this hard to describe because you talked about music. So I see it as a musical stave. It's 5 lines in white gold, punctuated by little quavers and musical notes. So I see it as black diamonds on the treble clef, which is at the end. But tell me, tell me why music.
Um, so I feel a bit of a phony choosing music, because I am not musical. I don't have a musical bone in my body, and much to my shame, I wish I did, but it's just not how I grew up. It's just not in me. But my husband is very musical, and he was a professional opera singer.
Oh, wow.
It means a lot to me because of how much it means to him, but also it's the reason that we got back together. My parents are very into opera. So my mum and stepdad were at Glyndebourne and they were watching him on the stage, but they weren't actually aware that it was him because I think he was in the chorus. And they bumped into him in the interval. And my mum said to me the next day, "Oh, we saw him last night, and I really think you should get back in touch with him because
What's his name?
he's called Lance, and I think he's the one for you." And so we hadn't spoken for a long time at that point, and we met up after that and just fell immediately back in love. And
that's so romantic.
so I do credit. I mean, I hope we would have found our way back to each other, but it definitely was opera that enabled that. And it's now something that I'm so conscious of with our two girls. I'm so scared they're going to inherit my complete lack of musicality.
How old are your girls?
They are 3 and 1.
Okay, so it's a bit early days to see whether they're musical.
It's early days, but we are convinced that the 1-year-old is very musical. And so I've been making such a conscious effort. Like, we listen to music every single day. When I think for some people that is just a completely natural part of life. Like, they would just play music and listen to it. But that's just, I'm a words person. Like, I would be listening to a radio show or a podcast. There's so much similarity between cooking and music from speaking to these musicians, because they're both ways that you can really develop your own sense of self and instill a sense of confidence in yourself. And those are all things that I definitely wish for my children.
For your children.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I've never really thought of either cooking or music about that kind of developing confidence.
I think it was Jack Savoretti, the singer, who I interviewed recently, and he said that he discovered around the age of 15, he discovered music and cooking kind of at the same time. And it was him that first pointed that out to me, that music was such a expression of who he was, and he also found exactly the same through cooking. And they're both things that he certainly would do to make other people happy. And you sort of and you discover so much through yourself in that process. But also the end result is something that you share with people that you love. And so I thought that was really interesting, that there are similarities between the two.
Yes. So Margie, well, I know what about the last charm. The last charm is a gold heart with a desert island and a palm tree inside of it. So I haven't drawn the island, but I've drawn, as you can see, I've drawn the palm tree, and I see that as 3-dimensional, exactly as you'd expect, with a kind of slightly bent trunk, and all the markings of on the palm tree, on the texture. And the leaves are in white gold, speckled with small diamonds, and each leaf is articulated so that they do move. And you can see there on the end of the branch, I've put a tiny little tourmaline, carved tourmaline heart, and tourmaline comes in lots of colours, but actually this is a pink heart. So it's bicolour, and on the back of the leaves, I would engrave desert island dishes. So I'm assuming that desert island dishes is what this represents.
You are right, Annoushka. Yes, that's gorgeous.
I'd really love you to explain in detail how you went from cooking career, cooking from Zulu, teaching Zulu ladies how to cook, to cooking for the Queen, to running a catering business, to having a banana ice cream business, to Desert Island Dishes podcast.
So at the time I was cooking full time, but I felt like I was an early adopter to podcasts. I was listening to them when didn't really know anyone else that was listening to podcasts, and I thought it would be fun to start my own, but I had no idea of what that would look like. And it sounds very strange, but I can only describe it as a light bulb moment. I was driving in the car And I suddenly just thought, oh my goodness, what happens if I put those questions that I've always asked people anyway? What happens if that is the podcast? And it could be called Desert Island Dishes. And that all just sort of came in one moment. Yeah. And I immediately pulled over to Google Desert Island Dishes to see whether anyone was doing anything similar. Was the name available? And so, yeah, I immediately trademarked it. And I think 2 weeks later, I'd recorded my first episode.
So how did you go about finding your first guest?
So
who was your first guest?
So my first guest was Esther Corrin,
Right.
who is a very successful journalist, and at that point she was also a recipe writer, and she's married to the restaurant critic Giles Corrin, and I'd been to a talk that she'd done, and I thought she was brilliant and very funny, and I didn't know her, but I just reached out to her and pitched her my idea, and she said yes, which was very generous and kind of her. But I think that's something that I get asked a lot from doing the podcast is I think people assume that I must be very well connected and that I'm friends with all of these people, and that's not the case at all.
It's amazing. You had the most extraordinary people on your podcast.
Yeah, I think that's just it just goes to show you just have to ask people, and people might say no, but they might say yes, and there's nothing to lose.
Yeah. So this is in 2017.
Yeah, 2017.
So you had the idea, and then you rush around trying to work out how to record it. I mean, just on a practical level.
It was such early days in podcasting that now you could Google how to start a podcast, and there would be so many helpful articles telling you what to do. But back then, there really wasn't much. So I had a very basic setup of I just had one of those, I think those recorders that a journalist will use to record
a dictaphone.
Dictaphone, which they've never then put that out as an interview. That's just for their own records. But I literally had one of them, and I just put it down in the middle of the table and record. But I think one of the important lessons that I've learned throughout my life is that if you're going to do something, you might as well just start and see how it goes. I think you can spend too long planning, and if you get stuck in that stage for too long, you get in the trap of it being perfect. And I think my philosophy is done is better than perfect, and then you can always improve. I wouldn't want to listen back to those early episodes, and I hope that I've improved in many regards.
We've got so many followers and so many listeners. It's absolutely extraordinary. But kind of looking back now, what would you do differently?
I do it all differently. I don't know.
Would you?
Well, I don't know, because it's such a difficult question, isn't it? Because you've ended up where you are, and would that have happened if you'd have made any different choices along the way?
So maybe you wouldn't have ended up doing what you're doing. You may have done something completely different. But do you see yourself as successful now?
No.
No.
No. Oh my goodness, no. I haven't even got started.
Okay, so what success look like, and if you haven't got started, what are you going to do? What's next?
Desert Island Dishes for me has been really interesting, because when I started, I was cooking full time, and it was just a side project that I was doing, and it was very much just a passion project. It was fun, and I never even thought of monetizing it. It just wasn't that isn't what it was. And it was only when I had to take time off, actually had a really difficult pregnancy. So I had quite a lot of time off waiting for my baby to arrive. And then I had the time off during maternity leave and COVID and all the rest of it. So I had quite a lot of time to actually step back and think about what I was doing. And it's weird when you have a different perspective, because if you're just doing it day to day, like I was with the podcast, I was just religiously putting them out every week, but not really looking at the numbers, not really thinking of it beyond that. And then having this time away from it, I was actually able to think about what I was doing and look at how far it had come. And that has actually been a turning point for me, because now I'm not doing so much cooking. The podcast is the main focus. It's grown in a way that I never could have imagined, just organically. And now I want to think about what could happen if I actually start to put all of that energy into desert island dishes, and what it could be beyond the podcast. I think.
Are we going to give us a clue?
I think the questions are interesting, whoever you are, and the people that we have on the podcast are obviously amazing and they're successful and they have these stories. But everybody has stories. You know, you sit next to someone at a dinner party and you could hear the best stories that you've ever heard, or someone walking down the street has a brilliant answer to the best dish they've ever eaten. So I want to make it more of a community, and I want to build out different arms to support that and tell stories through food. I think it is obviously a podcast about food, but more than that, it's a podcast about people.
It's all about
so I really want to make a food community and platform where we focus on the stories, not just the food.
And just from a really kind of ignorant point of view, in terms of how you monetize something like that, because, you know, it's not obvious, I think, to people how you do monetize something.
Like so that's why working with brands and advertisers is really important for something like a podcast. And I think people can get frustrated listening to adverts, but that is how it is able to keep going. And you've got different options, but if you're listening to something like a podcast and it's free to listen to, the trade-off is that you have to listen to the adverts, because that is how the creator is able to keep bringing it to you.
Oh, it's so interesting. Now I've got to ask you, I'm afraid. I really have got to ask you. I've got to ask you, what would the dish be that you take to the desert island before you go?
I told you, I don't have an answer.
I have to ask the question.
I always worry about answering this question, because I think people maybe do sometimes think about what my answer would be, and I don't want to disappoint them, which probably says more about me. But I think I'd pick something that is delicious, but it also means a lot to me. And my mum's chicken and sweet corn pie has been with me at every important milestone in my life. It's the best pie you'll ever taste. She's a brilliant cook, and the fact that she's made it for me the night before I went away to school, or the night before I went traveling, I had it the night before I got married. This pie has been with me at very important milestones throughout my life.
So it's your real comfort food.
Yeah, it's my ultimate comfort food, but not any chicken pie. It has to be my mum's.
No, fair enough.
And that would be
fair
that.
enough. Well, I'm so glad. Thank you for answering, and thank you so much for coming. It's been absolutely lovely talking to you and hearing your story. It's an amazing story. As you say, all of these stories are so interesting. So Margie, one final thing. As a thank you for coming to do this for me, I'd like to make you one of the charms.
No, Annoushka.
And so you have to choose one.
Oh my goodness! I was going to frame this piece of paper. This is more than
paper, but I'd love you to choose one.
It's hard to choose between what it means to me and then how beautifully you've designed them.
Well, I always think that charms are really they're about the memories they evoke and the stories they tell. So if that helps.
I think maybe for me it has to be the shooting star, just because that was such a pivotal moment in my life. And when I feel like that that particular holiday and that particular memory is something that's always going to stay with me forever. So I think that would be what I'd have to pick.
Okay, well, I'm gonna love making that for you. So I think we'll put maybe Isla along the side, and maybe desert island dishes on the back.
Have I chosen the right one? I don't know.
I'm absolutely thrilled. Well, I'd love to make that for you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a great pleasure. Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.